And good evening, ladies and gentlemen, across the Indiana University athletics diaspora. Galen Clavio here, along with the X's and Joe's crew, Bob Moats and Mike Wiemuth, as we are here to a little bit late, not quite a breaking news podcast, but a follow-up on a big commitment for Indiana men's basketball from this past weekend. The four-star wing from Wisconsin, Vaughn Karvala, committing to play for Darren DeVries and the Indiana Hoosiers. He did that right during the Indiana football game. It was a curious case of timing. We'll get into that a little bit. But we're delighted to have the gents with us once again as we celebrate another IU recruit joining the ranks. Mike, Bob, great to see you. Mike, how are things with you? How's the East Coast treating you?
Pretty good. As given that Penn State's playing IU this week, it's obviously a little bit awkward, but less awkward this year than prior years. And I will say that, I've talked to other IU fans and grads like in the last week or two, and I think we'll all have the same sense that there's almost like a trading places quality to all this, where we're the Eddie Murphy character and the Penn State folks are all the Dan Aykroyd character, and so we're trying to figure out oh man, so this is what it's like to not toil in football poverty, for year over year.
Yeah. I've resolved that it's like the Star Trek original series episode Mirror Mirror, where the landing party's beaming down and they end up getting shot into an alternate universe where Spock has a beard and everybody's evil. And it's because I feel like IU football has somehow become the evil empire this year, where they're just blowing teams out and everybody every week just talks about how much they want to smash their opposition. Right. I don't know what this universe is, but I'm here for it. And certainly I was thinking the last time I was in Happy Valley was 26 years ago, broadcasting for WIUS as IU took on number 1 Penn State with LeVar Arrington and Courtney Brown. So
remember that
quite a return, but then I thought, wow, that was a quarter century ago. I really am old. It's yeah. Bob Moats, how is Bartholomew County treating you?
We're so far so good, pretty solid. The Parkside Pirates started off 3-1. We got our next game tomorrow night. Hopefully not around the same time as IU's tip off with Alabama A&M, I believe. Is it Alabama A&M?
Alabama A&M, yes.
So away we go. And it's again, this time of year, I know this is Mike's favorite time of the year where, I know you're skipping around the house, right, dude? I mean, this is we both are. It's basketball's fired up. College football's full throttle. We got a really cool end, not a great end from a nostalgia or from a good feel standpoint of the World Series, but baseball delivered for the first time, it seems like, since I was a kid and had hair. So it's really just a magnificent time of the year, and the Christmas channels are now on, which just means that all is right with the universe for a couple months. Right. That being said, it is strange. I love the trading places thing, Mike. The question is, are we really I think we are kind of like the Eddie Murphy character, but I would say Penn State's probably more like Ralph Bellamy and Don Amici, where they're just kind of are the evil ones that are, are breaking laws and just, you just kind of want to see them lose. And it's about time that I remember in 95, we were sitting in Memorial Stadium, and Penn State was number 1, and IU closed the gap to 1 touchdown with an onside kick.
Yeah,
and we beat the spread. And we always had we always had in our history, we might have denied Penn State a national championship with that performance, because that was still, it was before the CFP. It was, they had to play the Rose Bowl. They won the Rose Bowl, but that one game, I think it was Nebraska won it that year, and that pretty much, or was it Florida? Another school won it, and
it was Nebraska.
It was Nebraska, and that was hey, we denied a Big Ten team a national championship. Now we can go try to win one, beating Penn State at Happy Valley. Yeah, I kind of like this universe.
Yeah. Well, believe me, those Penn State people absolutely believe that IU cost them the national championship that year, because I'm reminded of that frequently by the locals around here.
Welcome to the conference, boys. Welcome to the conference.
30 years on, they're still talking about it. That's what you want. That's what you want. But anyway, we're going to talk IU football later. If you actually, for those of you who are watching along here, if you are interested in IU football, I'll be hosting a live podcast at 8:05 as we break down the college football playoff committee ranking reveal for tonight. No, we don't get ESPN here because they've canceled their carriage with YouTube TV. So we'll be finding other ways to talk about it, which is the joys of the internet. But we're going to talk IU basketball now as IU picks up another commit for the 2026 class. And let's just set the table for Vaughn Karvala, who he is and what he brings to the proverbial table. Karvala, 6'6", originally from Oregon, Wisconsin, and chose IU over a variety of different teams. The top two leading contenders for his services at the tail end of the recruitment were Cal and Xavier, but there were several other suitors in the mix. 30th player ranking nationally in the ESPN 100, 42nd in 24/7's rankings, 59th in the Rivals on 3 rankings. And so, Mike, where does he land in the recruiting rankings?
He is within the sweet spot that that we've talked about so often on this pod. Yes.
And just to set the agenda for everybody, you've explained this many times on X's and Joe's. The sweet spot in your research and your evaluation of recruiting in college basketball is
basically it is the zone of players that occurs in every class, which have the necessary basically the necessary experience and talent that you see on national championship winning rosters. So it's basically a backward looking analysis I do. I just look at all the national championship teams, pull out all the important players that contributed, and over the years on some longitudinal studies just found that there just going to be a lot of the high school kids that are kind of rated around the 30 to 80 range. Relative to all the other ranges within the recruit rank. So that's why the sweet spot is basically kind of in that zone.
And also where those players are likely to stick around for more than a season and not be one and dones is kind of the other half of that equation.
Exactly. Yeah. I mean, the whole point is like because of the rate of kids rated in the top 25, top 30 jumping out of college into the pros, it basically, affects their, their ability to contribute long term.
And this has been a problem area for IU basketball for a while, in that they've tended to either shoot high or end up with players below the sweet spot in that kind of 80 to 150 range. And it's not worked out, shall we say, over the course of the last 9 years or so.
Or longer than 9 years.
Well, not longer than that, yes, but particularly in the last 9 years, right?
Yes, particularly, yeah.
Bob, let's dive into who this player is. Karvala, with a lot of highlights out there and a lot of scouting reports that really highlight his shooting from outside, which is already a very common theme among the recruits that Darren DeVries is targeting and pulling in, at least outside of the bigs. Your overall evaluation of Karvala and what he brings to the table for Indiana when he joins the team in 26.
So again, you have to start with the shooting, and the shooting it's not just that he can hit open shots, but he can get his own shot. He can do it off the bounce. Great range, great touch. You've seen the highlights. You kind of see where he is with those areas. What impressed me kind of watching him in some full game stuff at Oregon, Wisconsin, and you're looking at, he's your typical kid who is a Power 4 player playing against high school competition that aren't Power 4 players. So you'll start noticing that he does see the floor extremely well. I wouldn't call him a big volume guy necessarily. You can always tell a volume player. He's looking for teammates. He makes good reads in half-court situations, does really well in transition, can attack off the bounce pretty effectively too, can get the ball to the lane. He has the usual, and if you're going to look for anything to nitpick, which I literally can take every sweet spot kid in these types of situations and nitpick it. You'll watch him, let's say, on defense, and he'll let a guy go by because he's baiting a block. He has the physicality to be able to block shots on those types of players. That's a sort of player, though, that you're going to be seeing building into a system. The great thing about what it seems that DeVries is doing is that he's not, when we would get sweet spot kids, we'd immediately try to slot him into a starter role. That was always kind of the thought process. And it appears to me that when you look at the depth of this program right now, with the wings in particular, you have Trent Sisley, who is 6'8", big wing. Nick Dorn, big wing with a little more athleticism, and maybe not as much touch and shooting ability as Sicily. You can slot Karvala in for basically a bench role in a key 8 without really having to do too much labor. And that actually that's kind of what Sicily's going to be doing this year, I think, with both DeVries, Dorn, and occasionally Conaway jumping in. So you can actually bring this guy along slowly. You're not putting too much pressure on him early on. You're not expecting him to produce at above the median or at elite or kind of that sort of exceptional type level. You're expecting this kid to come in and develop. And by the time, and Mike's research shows us so well, it's by the time those guys hit their junior year in particular, they're hitting full stride. So it's a long-term build. It's almost like a farm piece that you're bringing in. It's a triple, like a prospect you're bringing in. You're going to let him learn your system for a couple of years. Bringing him in with Prince Alexander Moody, you're going to have that type of situation where both of them are not going to be thrust necessarily into that sort of role that they're not particularly ready for. So it's a good pickup. One we're not used to. It's deliberate. I will just say one more thing about him. It's puzzling to a lot of people why Greg Gard wasn't living at his house. To me,
Right.
He looks like a Wisconsin Central casting player. And he's still, even with Wisconsin trying to upgrade their talent, is still in that sort of role. Shaka Smart could have used him at Marquette too, because you can always use that sort of range and that sort of shooting. Surprised Ben McCollum wasn't further in, because the other thing about this kid was, and Mike, he blew up on the scene, right? Like, he had a really good summer and he went from that 150-ish range and jumped into that top 50.
He jumped 80 spots because he basically blew up against the Oakland Soldiers, which has probably the most talented backcourt in all of AAU in the last maybe 20 years. He put up, like 24 points against Jason Crow and Tyron Stokes. So basically, like, the rankers look at that, like, and this is one of the things that make Karvala kind of like one of these players that I think the rankers get really kind of cranky in terms of like where do they slot these kind of kids, because if you have the kind of game where he had against the Oakland Soldiers, he basically was like playing like the number one player in the country, since he was literally playing better than the number one player in the country in that game. And then the game before that, he had I think it was against the Utah team, and I think he was 1 for 9 and had like 4 points. So the thing about Karvala, I think he's one of these like really volatile kind of high school recruits that has really high ceiling, but it's going to take some time, like Bob says, to kind of maybe pull him into the system, make him more of a long-term developmental piece, so that by the time he becomes a junior and senior, he can be a little more consistent than what he is right now.
Yeah, at 14 points per game this season on 38% shooting from the floor, 34% behind the arc, but shot a ton from three. This was all according to Adam Finkelstein from 24/7 Sports. About 2/3 of his total shots coming from three. But the shot itself looks really good. I mean, one of the things that stands out when you see the highlights is he's not afraid to put it up immediately. He does look to his teammates. He's passed into some good spots from the highlights that we've seen.
Mm-hmm.
He's somewhat active on the boards, which is nice as well. It's interesting trying to kind of evaluate where he's going to need to make some changes. I mean, obviously, like every rising high school prospect, especially one that's blown up like you were talking about, Bob, he's going to have to make better decisions. He's going to have to learn how to read the floor a lot better. And especially in what I'm anticipating the DeVries system is going to be, it's a system that really seems to rely on a positioning and an evaluation of like what the defense is allowing on a given possession and how you can move around that and how you can stretch them out from what they like to do. And so you never know with high school kids, even relatively highly ranked ones or ones that are rising up the rankings, but you need like having a central skill set that already is demonstrating itself, like the way he shoots from outside, is a really nice place to start.
It is, and the great news about what you're saying, Galen, is we're going to get some really good qualitative and quantitative data points next high school season with him, because he's going to a place called Bella Vista Prep in Scottsdale, Arizona, which is a high level prep school. Nationally, they're bringing nationally renowned program. Nationally, I wouldn't call them necessarily contending, but they're a high level national program. They bring out a lot of they do bring power conference players every year. They have him playing with that, and he's playing against them. One thing about Trent Sisley, we had the exact same questions a year ago about Sisley, and what he was able to do was go to Mount Verde and elevate his game. And I think you can see the same with the Karvala. If he's able to go to Scottsdale, elevate his game, play against higher level competition, learn some of those things in prep school. And I think you're going to see more and more kids. We're seeing more and more kids do that, where they do their second year, their last year of high school, sitting in a place like Mount Verde or Bella Vista or IMG Academy. And Cavi, you got a good point there that, it's I think with parity in the game, I will say this, the more we're seeing more kids that are developing, more kids that are getting into these types of situations and with the portal also, we're seeing that, oftentimes individual rankings are individual rankings. They're not 100% by any stretch of the imagination. And I think it needs to be we'll be having those conversations, I think, across the board over the next year in particular, which is, are we really still capturing the talent the way that we need to capture it?
Yeah. I mean, it's always been a crapshoot. It's funny, Taylor Lehman, who you all know from Bite Size Bison on the football side, he and I talk about this all the time. And the rankings on the high school level are there's a general aspect of accuracy, but there's a lot of data points that don't always add up. And it's because there's so many factors at play. And I think ultimately, you have to have a certain floor in terms of skill set and talent, but it really, and this kind of goes back, I think, Mike, to what the tenor of this conversation's been about. It's got to go to fit, both personality and skill set within relation to the system that somebody's being brought in on. And that, you mentioned Sisley, Bob, like that kind of player is clearly the type of player that we've seen out of DeVries and the antecedent systems that he's worked for. Like if you mentioned, he looks like a Wisconsin player. To me, he looks like a Creighton player.
He does. He definitely does. And I think you call those one and the same almost at times. Yeah.
It's like Blue Jays central casting, basically, kind of guy. And that's obviously in the Big Ten, you've got a slightly different additional skill set that you've got to build in on that just because of the relative strength of the conference. But that's to me seems to be what DeVries is going after with this and with some of the other targets that he's had.
Yeah, and it's funny you mentioned Creighton, because when DeVries is hired, and this is something I do with any like big time hire, but particularly with IU, I'll kind of project sort of like a high end and sort of like low end estimate of what I think is possibly going to happen with this hire. Like, okay, what kind of program is going to have? Well, what is it going to look like in terms of the how he's going to conduct his offense and defense. The one thing I kind of like earmarked in my notes with DeVries was that I could totally see IU becoming Creighton East over the next 4 or 5 years. And I think it's kind of accurate looking at some of the guys he's targeting, now, and also just like looking forward. I mean, Chase Brandon is totally like a kid I could see that Greg McDermott would just, throw the kitchen sink at in terms of trying to get him on board. But yeah, you're right. I mean, it's when it comes to the rankings, you're right, and we'll probably, I think Bob and I will have a pod on this at some point, to kind of talk about the over the time that I've been like following like the rankings and like, okay, are they more or less accurate? And you are right that I tend to look at categories, like whether a guy is 53 or 67. I mean, statistically, predictively, it just is not that big of a deal. Now, once you start to get into like, okay, the difference between like 90 and 30, okay, now you are talking about actual predictive differences that have manifest themselves, over time. But I would say like the way you almost have to look at it is that you're right. There's a baseline level of talent and athleticism you need in order to foster a roster that can win 25, 27, 30 games in college basketball at, like the Power 4 level. But more specifically, as a coach, you're thinking, okay, I can probably target, 15, 20 kids that basically meet that minimum threshold that also might actually fit in my system.
Right.
And the other like 50 or 60 are either they're out of my range, they're out of, my geography, none of my assistants have any connections to them, and also they don't fit my system. So if I can get like just a certain percentage of that core of like, 12, 15, 20 kids I'm targeting, if I get enough of those, whether it's in high school or portal, then I'm going to be in good shape. And I think you're right, is that the fit part of it is the secondary category once you get past the minimum talent threshold.
And there's another one. Sometimes you just don't like the kid or they bring him to campus and it's like, yeah, no, this is a disaster waiting to happen. So, I mean, there are so many factors that play into kids that go from offer to visit to commit that, sometimes you'll see those backaways also. This was a situation also where IU went up really against Cal and Xavier, and both an ACC program that's probably would have put him in almost immediately. And then Xavier, who probably would have been close to putting in him almost immediately out of the Big East. But it is an encouraging sign for IU that they're kind of getting into this position and finding this type of talent right before it blows up, especially considering they were coming off Anthony Thompson, which we talked about, a little bit on the last episode of X's and Joe's, where it's like, okay, you can take this kid for a year. It's a 1-year rental. What's a better thing long-term for you? The big question, I think, for IU now, though, moving forward, you're going to start noticing, again, looks, the post position, they're still in on a couple, not looking according to some of the inside sources as being overly promising with Dion, who's looking like potentially Houston is the team to beat. But I do think at some point, this is where I think DeVries is going to be looking heavily as to what his next thing is. It's going to be that spot, as well as I also think he's going to need some more penetration power, some ability to have penetrators and shooters. We've had a couple people mention on the Discord, it's possible Connerway, Jay Horry brings us up that Connerway could have a 6th year.
Right.
And that's a possibility. And it looks like, based on how they've recruited, that they're expecting a 6th year for Connerway. And then you find another guard that can kind of come in and do co-lead, occasional spell lead. Drake can also be that player. Ristish could be that type of player. But you also, and Alexander Moody, but you probably want a guy that's more firmly in, that's a 1 or 2 year player in that sort of second guard spot that can kind of come in and provide more punch. Think about Lance Jones when he went to Purdue. That would be an example.
So
there's a secondary.
Hi, Mark. Yeah.
The question for those who aren't watching, with IU losing the bulk of the starting lineup in production, how many longer term kids will IU target? This is an interesting question these days, because as it turns out, players can come from anywhere. Because apparently G League players are now eligible to come and back and play at college level. We've seen that happen a couple of times. But it is an interesting question to balance, and obviously you want to have players that will come in and at least be able to contribute, but you also want to have a situation where those players aren't going to decide to leave and go somewhere else, and that initial investment doesn't work out. So Mike, how do you strike that balance right now if you're Darren DeVries and you did a complete roster reset? You purposely brought in older players, which that's a model that's smart in both basketball and football at this point. Older players generally just succeed better.
Yeah.
And yet you want to lay a foundation for the future. I guess my takeoff of Mark's question is there such a thing as a long-term kid that is also good, that you can bank on being there for more than a couple of seasons?
Yeah, well, I mean, just keep this. Here's a stat that we discussed, I think, last X's and Joe's. Of the top 50 players in college basketball, metrically, in terms of, like box plus minus, win shares and all that, about half of them are portal players, and the other half are original recruits from, to the school that they originally committed to. So basically it's half and half. So if you're talking about like, can that happen? Well, yeah, it's happening about half the time with the top players in college basketball.
Yeah.
So you almost have to look at it like two separate pools that are basically feeding into the same place. It's
Right.
just really the difference is time. A kid like Anthony Thompson, you almost have to look at him like a portal player that's a senior. It's like he's going to come in for 1 year. He's going to hopefully give you, a good 7, 8, 9 box plus minus kind of contribution, hopefully be a near all conference kind of performer and, get you deep somewhere into the tournament. Now with the team that you have now and knowing what IU's losing, I think you almost have to take a heavier portion of portals, just given the fact that you don't want year 2 to be another rebuilding year. In this environment with what you see going on at like Louisville and Michigan, and I've said before, like those two schools are going to be kind of a barometer, I think, for how IU is going to be compared, with the higher degrees. With what those kind of schools are doing, you really have to have year 2 be not necessarily, you don't have to go to the Final Four in year 2 or being that kind of team, but you have to be kind of moving pretty close to that. And I think, and so like you have to get starters, but then on the back end, you have to start like filling just enough of the kind of Trent Sisleys and the kind of kids like Karvala that's going to give you some like sweet spot kids, later on.
Yeah, I mean,
and I'll just throw this out with it. Well, I'll just throw this out and to support Mike. And I think the other part of that is when you look at those other programs, you can also then go a different direction because you're not having to go full blow 13 players or 12 out of 13 in the portal and international. You can also then look to some of these guys who are unhappy at other Division I programs or coaching change type situations. Think about Tamar Bates in reverse. Like you would want to take a Tamar Bates type situation. That's the guy you're looking for if you're DeVries, a kid coming out of his sophomore year looking to ascend as a junior. The kid can play. Get him in our system, get him scoring, get him playing. Yeah. And that to me seems to be where the gold standard for IU compared to the Louisvilles, Kentuckys, and Michigans. They can now jump into that, and that's where you get a longer. Yes, it is. The year 2 is year 3. You can start getting those players in because you're having to look for fewer of them, and you can actually focus more on those more competitive recruitments.
We talked about this on the subscriber-only video from Crimson Cast earlier today about it was really about NIL setup for basketball, but it was really kind of in response to the Anthony Thompson situation. And it's an interesting spot right now if you're a college basketball coach who has national title aspirations, because you have to play money ball with your resources. And as Mike mentioned, you don't want a 1-year rental, especially if you don't like, are you going to win a national title if you grab that player and you have him for a year and you spend $3.5 million? Probably not. There might be a player like that is transformative enough, but that player is probably getting like $7 or $8 million for the 1 year that they're playing in college basketball. But then you also have to think about what, like, if you had, assuming there are not infinite resources available, and I think outside of like Texas Tech and BYU, I don't think anybody has infinite resources at this point. What resources do you want to spend? What are you saying to the people giving you the resources that you're going to get in relation to what you're spending? And then within your own confines, what is your system going to be best served by in terms of the skill sets and the overall abilities of the players? And, it's like the comment earlier about sometimes you get someone in there on a visit and it's like, no, this is all wrong. I would dare say that part of the problem that Indiana had in the portal the last couple of years was worrying about ranking or perceived talent first and fit second. And, fit ends up being a really important aspect of the money ball here. It's like the unspoken element where you could spend money on someone, but it might end up making you worse, not because the player's not good, but because they're not a good fit for what you're doing. And that's something that we generally don't see as fans or as observers. That's something that the coaches, you have to trust their vision. And first they have to demonstrate they have a vision. Then you have to trust the vision that they've demonstrated, that they know who fits with them and who does not.
Yeah. And I appreciate you're giving us you're giving the viewers a bit of a preview of the fact that we will be having an X's and Joe's Moneyball
Nice.
at some point in the near future. We're talking about this exact point.
Exact thing. Couple weeks. Yeah.
But you're right, Galen. Like there's also just a fact of reality. I mean, like again, when we talk about sort of doing the backtracking of, okay, well, what do national championship teams actually look like? And you saw like all the sweating over like not getting Anthony Thompson top 10 player. It's something I've reminded people like frequently. In the last 6 tournaments, the national championship winning teams and the starters, there's only been one top 30 starter on a national championship team in the last 6 years. That was Stefan Castle from UConn. If you went back 15 years, that rate was more about 80%. It means like literally like 4/5 of the guys are starting on national championship teams are top 30 players. Now it's down to 3%. So I think you, as fans, you could have to recalibrate your expectations and understanding of like, okay, this is what national championship rosters look like now versus then. And so, and yeah, I think people just have to get a little bit more used to the idea that, yeah, you do need talent. Absolutely. There's no change in the actual talent level that you're going to need. It's just going to be coming from a different source than maybe you're accustomed to.
Right. I'm going to show some,
we're
going to show some highlights here while we talk, guys. Keep going, Bob.
And I would also throw out that, you know, Todd Golden kind of blew up some calculus this year with the way he constructed his roster, and nobody was in the top 100 on his team. So I would think another thought, you know, a big thought also that we need to look at here is, as you're looking at the portal, where can where do you have more talent? Well, is it, you know, you're looking at, again, wing players, those 6'2" to 6'6" guys who are coming from all sorts of different sources where they can also play up. So when you start thinking about how you're going to fill your roster, do you take Anthony Thompson at 30 plus minutes, or do you take a Vaughn Karvala, you bring him with Dorn and Sisley, and then you go get a couple 6'4" guys to kind of fill in to maybe see which one of them could work out as a co-lead and a decent shooting, decent off guard.
Yeah.
And then also then look at that money you're investing and knowing that post players, bigs, are not a commodity. I mean, they're a very low supply, high demand commodity. You want to have enough firepower to go get yourself a guy that can actually fill that role and can be much more effective playing on that, you know, basically playing in that 6'11", that 6'10", 6'11" position. So you're not undersizing the bigs.
Absolutely.
Hey, there's one secondary advantage of bringing in Karvala on that particular point. His teammate at BV Prep is Paul Osarari. He's the number 2 center in the 2027 class.
Oh,
so hopefully, maybe if they strike up a good enough friendship, that there could be a little bit of back end recruiting, hopefully for IU on the for that very coveted 5 spot going into the next class.
Yeah, I watching some more highlights of Karvala here, and this was a nice pass. I like that.
Great look.
It was not a big assist guy this last year, but that's certainly something that playing against better competition is going to help him with. But no, I mean, I like the decisiveness. I like the shooting, obviously. You know, seems bouncy in a way that sometimes players like this are not necessarily.
You look at who they're playing against, and again, it's one of those things where you slice them up like a Christmas ham, and it's like, you know, you can just tell that that's a player that, you know, and one of his adjustment phases is going to be, and this is lucky he has a year to do this, and he showed this in AAU that he can step up, but you're not always going to be the best player on the floor or the best player in your area code, and that's one of the big lessons that especially kids coming out of high school have to learn. So
yeah. I mean, the good thing about him is that, you know, a lot of times these kids, especially they come out of like small rural towns, but they have like really great numbers. What you notice is that they'll go in the summer circuit and they get killed. And then you just realize, okay, this kid can't hang. I mean, like I said, Karvala, I mean, what he did against Oakland, he dropped like, I think 28 against JL3 out of Houston. And they've got, you know, a McDonald's All-American kid, you know, caliber kid in Elijah Williams. I think he dropped 18 on Boo Williams. You know, of course, you know, Boo always has like, you know, really athletic kids playing. So, I mean, he's definitely shown that one of the biggest stumbling blocks to kids that are oftentimes, coming out of like smaller schools, is that he can actually hang athletically with a lot of these elite kids. And there's another thing I was thinking about today, and I was texting with someone else. I was thinking about this as a category. Can you think of the last time IU had a top 50 signee who is 6'6" plus, had upper tier vertical leap and good shooting at the same time? I can't think of one.
Brian Evans.
You think he had upper tier vertical?
Yeah, Jeff Newton,
even as a Toho
he
guy,
played. He got over the rim every once in a while. I mean, hey, or do you want to throw Calbert Chaney into the mix?
Yeah.
Literally, that's like how far I think you have to go back if you're really like looking as a category of like, okay, that specific, type of player. And these are the kind of players that oftentimes you look at like some of the old Michigan teams with John Beilein. They would have like 2 or 3 kids like that. Yeah. So it's, it's obviously it's a change for the better. Right.
I did have to look this up because I'm not up on my Wisconsin geography. Do you guys know where Oregon, Wisconsin is?
It's basically like Martinsville to Madison, Wisconsin, right? I mean, we're talking like it's like you could do a day at the Dells and be okay. You can do a Paul Bunyan for breakfast and be back for football.
Yeah,
you know who also graduated from Oregon, Wisconsin?
I should know this
person.
We should all be. And he's told me, and I forgot. So, Mike, this is a good one.
You're going to be seeing him this coming weekend against IU on the sidelines. Shaka Smart.
Oh, Shaka Smart is from Oregon, Wisconsin. I had no idea. Interesting. Well, learn something new every day, I guess. But
didn't IU get a guy out of Oregon, Wisconsin one time?
No, that was
Mark Johnson for some years ago.
Oh, okay. Yeah. Sorry, I was thinking Todd Meyer, but that was Oshkosh, Wisconsin.
Oshkosh.
So yes. Anyway, gents, we didn't want to go forever on this. We wanted to talk about the player. We saw some highlights. Any final thoughts from either of you? We'll hopefully have some more recruiting to talk about here relatively soon. But any final thoughts on Vaughn Karvala?
Good pickup. And, when you look at a situation where people are wondering, did IU have a backup plan if Thompson fell through? This is a pretty good backup plan. Yeah. So it shows so it does show that there's a process in place and it's seeming to work. And we'll just see about what the next domino to fall will be.
Yeah, kind of the same. I was also thinking of like, some of the backup plans in the past. If you missed on like an Anthony Thompson kind of player, then IU oftentimes would be scrambling and, looking for something that 9 times out of 10 ended up being a much lesser talented player than what they were shooting for. And so I think that's a little bit part of the encouraging aspect to this, besides the fact that, he's a little bit of different category of what I was recruiting at the wing position, but also just the fact of like what DeVries can do if things don't actually go the way you want. You want to be the ability for your coach to kind of audible on the run and, still pick up some pretty talented pieces, even when you don't get your option A recruits.
Exactly. As we've learned, it's important to not constantly be all in recruiting. It just doesn't work. And obviously, I think Indiana is closing in on some opportunities to get some higher ranked players, but you want to fill with this particular level of recruit. This seems like a really nice piece to add to what's going to be an intriguing roster when he finally gets here, and one that we still don't really know what it's going to look like. So that's the fun aspects of this business right now, is that you can just kind of throw your hands up. You don't really know. And it's also, frankly, the same in football to a large degree in terms of who the actual contributors are going to be when they finally get here. But should be fun. Guys, when is the next X's and Joes coming out? Is this the Moneyball episode, or is it another episode coming out?
We're gonna talk about coaching chip stacks, and Mike and I are sometime probably Thursday going to go ahead and cut that. That was at least our original plan. So we're going to get that out here in the next 3 days.
Yeah. And Galen, is this your, I'm guessing this is about your 25th podcast appearance today, or?
Well, yeah. Well, Sunday was the busy day. I think I did 3 separate ones. I'm only doing two. Well, I guess technically I did a third earlier because I did that VIP episode. So, hey, you know what? Fish swim, mammals breathe oxygen. I podcast. This is just kind of how it works. So, but
at least you gained an hour. At least you gained an hour.
Okay. But gents, as always, a pleasure. Thanks to all you folks for joining us live and those who joined us afterwards. Be sure to check out X's and Joe's, subscribe on Spotify and Apple, and check them out on the Back Home Network channel. Please watch Crimson Cast. We'll be bringing lots of stuff to you throughout the course of the week, including the Indiana Penn State football preview, the next episode of Crimson Cash, which should come out Thursday. And then if you're really interested, tune in 9 minutes on the Back Home Network channel. I'll be going live with Matt Blaska, football weather. We're going to be breaking down the CFP rankings as Indiana going to be somewhere. Could they be first? Will they be second? Will they be third? We'll find out. They're going to be somewhere in the top 3. I feel pretty good about that. But looking forward to talking to you all there. So hop on over to that one. Mike Wiemuth, Bob Moats, great to see you, gentlemen, as always. And we will catch you folks on the flip side. Thanks for joining us here on the Back Home Network. So long, everybody.
Beat Penn State.